She was kicked out with nothing but a child in her arms, no roof over her head, and pain in her heart. No one saw her cry. No one offered a hand. But what they didn't know was the very place that broke her would soon bear her name. What happened in the next 24 hours would leave even her cruelest enemy stunned. A twist of fate, a hidden secret, and a silent comeback no one could have predicted. This isn't just a story of survival. It's a masterclass in quiet revenge. Maria sat at the edge of the worn-out couch, her eyes locked on the final notice clenched in her trembling hands. It was the third in 2 months. A bright red stamp screamed eviction pending across the top. The apartment was dim. The electricity had been cut off that morning. The silence was broken only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator that no longer kept anything cold because the shelves inside were nearly empty. A single carton of milk and half a loaf of bread were all that remained. In the next room, her 4-year-old son, Julian, was drawing quietly by candlelight. He didn't ask for much. He hadn't since the day his father died in that sudden car crash 8 months ago. Since then, Maria had barely been surviving. One missed bill led to another. Her job as a part-time cleaner paid too little, too late. And now, the roof over their heads was the next thing to go. A sudden, aggressive knock at the door made her jump. It was Mr. Grayson, the landlord. Tall, heavy-set, and always angry, he pushed the door open before she could even greet him. "Maria," he barked, "I've had it. You're 3 months behind. I don't run a charity here. I just need a little more time," Maria pleaded, stepping between him and the living room. "Please, my next paycheck." "I've heard it all before," he snapped. "You think you're special because you've got a kid? That's not my problem. I've got paying tenants lined up. You've got until this evening. Get out." She looked down, her face flushed with humiliation. Julian peeked around the corner, sensing something was wrong. "You're putting us out?" she whispered, as if trying not to let her son hear the worst. Mr. Grayson's expression didn't change. "You should have thought of that before freeloading off my property." With that, he turned and left, slamming the door behind him. Maria's hands shook as she packed what little they had. 2 bags for clothes, 1 for Julian's school books, and his only pair of sneakers. Everything else, memories, dishes, furniture, would stay behind. She carried the bags while Julian held onto her hand, looking up at her without questions. He learned not to ask. The sun had begun to set when they stepped outside, the chill settling into the air. No neighbors came out to help. No one even watched. She walked the streets with her son, bag straps digging into her shoulders, until she found her way to a local women's shelter that agreed to take them in for the night. It wasn't home, but it was warm and safe. That night, after Julian had fallen asleep on a borrowed cot beside her, Maria sat on the floor with an old box of her husband's belongings, items the coroner's office had returned after the crash. She hadn't been able to open it before. The pain had been too much. But now, with everything stripped from her, she needed to feel him again. Needed a reason to believe something good still existed in the world. She opened the box slowly, lifting out his watch, a folded t-shirt, the keychain he'd always carried. And then, beneath a tangle of receipts and documents, she found an envelope. It was sealed, yellowed at the edges. Her name was written on the front, in his unmistakable handwriting. Our ticket to a new life. Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at it, heart pounding. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. And in that moment, everything else, the shelter, the cold floor, the ache of being humiliated and cast out, faded into silence. Maria held it to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't know yet what was inside, but something told her everything was about to change. She traced the handwriting with her fingertips, firm, steady, unmistakably his. Her husband, Daniel, had always been thoughtful like that. Even after months since his passing, the sight of his handwriting still brought tears to her eyes. She remembered the day he died so vividly. It had started like any other, but just before the accident, he had called her. She'd picked up in the middle of folding laundry, his voice crackling through the phone with barely contained excitement. "I have good news," he'd said. "I'll tell you everything when I get home." But he never made it. Her hand trembled as she broke the seal. Inside was a folded slip of paper, thick, official-looking, and something else. A lottery ticket. She blinked at it in disbelief, then unfolded the document behind it. Her breath caught in her throat. The numbers matched. The letterhead at the top bore the name of the National Lottery Commission, stamped and dated. The winnings listed $10 million. She reread it 3 times, unsure if grief was playing tricks on her. But it was real. The ink, the signature, even Daniel's initials scribbled in the corner of the ticket. He had bought it days before the accident. He had been trying to surprise her. That was the good news he never got the chance to share. For a long time, she just sat there, staring at it, her mind spinning. The next morning, Maria wrapped the ticket in plastic, tucked it deep inside her purse, and made her way to the lottery office downtown. The city moved around her, fast and uncaring, but she walked with a new stillness, cautious, deliberate. She didn't want to believe until someone else confirmed it. At the lottery claim center, she stood in line behind people cashing in scratch-offs and smaller prizes, gripping her documents like they might vanish if she loosened her hold. When it was finally her turn, she stepped up to the counter and slid the ticket, the notarized death certificate, and Daniel's old ID across the desk. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with a tired expression, studied the materials, then looked up. "Please have a seat. This may take a while." It took nearly 2 hours. They scanned, verified, cross-checked. A manager came in, then another. Someone called the national office. Maria sat in silence the entire time, hands locked together, staring at the floor. Finally, the manager returned. "Congratulations, Mrs. Alvarez. The claim is valid." She didn't speak. "You're now the legal beneficiary of your husband's $10 million winnings." Still, no words came. Only tears. She thanked them softly, took the paperwork, and stepped outside into the sunlight. People walked past her without noticing anything had changed. But in her chest, something had cracked open, something long buried under grief and struggle. Hope. That night, back in a shelter, she sat beside Julian as he colored on the floor with broken crayons. She stroked his hair gently and whispered, "Daddy didn't forget us." The next few days, Maria barely slept. She immersed herself in research, safe investments, how to manage unexpected wealth, property taxes, insurance, how to protect herself legally. She created a plan, not for luxury, but for security. No more sleeping on borrowed cots. No more wondering where the next meal would come from. She'd lost her husband, but not his love, not his promise. And now, for the first time in a long time, she had the power to give Julian the life they had once dreamed of together. And she would. No more fear, no more begging, only moving forward. The glow of Maria's laptop lit the dim shelter room late into the night. Julian was already asleep beside her, his tiny form wrapped in a donated quilt, his chest rising and falling in soft rhythm. Maria scrolled through endless real estate listings, her finger pausing on properties she couldn't believe she now had the power to afford. But she wasn't looking for luxury or prestige. She wanted permanence. Something solid. Something hers. Then her heart stopped. There it was. A familiar address. Her old building. The headline was brief but shocking. Property auction. Multi-unit residential complex in prime location. Immediate sale. Maria leaned forward, staring at the screen. It was her old home, the very building Mr. Grayson had tossed her and Julian out of, as if they were trash. She could still hear his voice, filled with smug cruelty. Could still see his back as he walked away, leaving her humiliated on the curb. Her pulse quickened. Her eyes narrowed. She reread the listing twice to be sure. Mr. Grayson was selling. She closed the laptop slowly, sat back on the cot. Her thoughts swirled. Disbelief, anger, disbelief again. And then clarity. She wouldn't confront him, wouldn't warn him, wouldn't even show her face. She would buy it. The day of the auction arrived cloudy and cool, with a slight breeze that tugged at the brim of Maria's wide black hat. Her simple black dress clung modestly to her figure, and oversized sunglasses masked her eyes. She carried a neutral clutch, nothing flashy, just enough to carry the necessary paperwork and proof of funds. No one in the room recognized her. She liked it that way. The auction hall was buzzing. Investors milled about, sipping coffee, discussing potential returns. Maria sat near the back, silent, observing. She watched as the auctioneer opened bidding on the building. A few hands went up quickly. Confident, sharp movements from men in tailored suits and women in sleek business attire. Maria waited. The bidding climbed. $300,000. $450,000. $520,000. She raised her hand. The room paused briefly. Heads turned curious. Her calm composure and hidden eyes made her unreadable. The auctioneer pointed toward her. New bid, $550,000. The room thinned. One by one, bidders dropped out. Then one man countered. $575,000. Maria raised her hand again. $600,000. A murmur rippled through the room. The auctioneer nodded, impressed. $600,000 it is. The last bidder hesitated, then dropped out. The gavel came down. Sold. To bidder number 17. Maria didn't smile. She didn't clap. She gathered her things quietly and stood. The building was hers. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. She stood near the steps of the auction house, adjusting her sunglasses, letting the moment settle in her chest. The building that had rejected her now had her name on it. She didn't gloat. She didn't rush to call anyone. Instead, she walked slowly to her car, her heels tapping against the pavement, her spirit calm and steady. Her son was waiting for her at the shelter, and she had something new to offer him. Not just a roof, but a future secured by her strength. She didn't need to tell the world what she had done. The building would speak for her. In time, she placed the keys in her purse, slid into the driver's seat, and drove away without ever revealing who she truly was. Maria Alvarez, once a tenant, now an owner. And no one saw her coming. Within a week of signing the final documents, Maria hired a discreet and highly rated property management company to oversee the transition. She gave clear instructions. Renovations were to begin immediately, quietly, efficiently. No announcement of ownership. Her name was to remain entirely off the books. And so, while tenants continued their daily lives inside the aging apartment complex, trucks rolled in with supplies. Old carpets were pulled up and replaced with polished hardwood floors. Cracked walls were patched and painted in warm, welcoming tones. Lighting fixtures were upgraded, staircases reinforced, and a new security system installed at the main gate. Even the neglected courtyard was transformed. Weeds ripped out, replaced with flower beds and benches where children could play safely. The tenants noticed. Hallways no longer smelled of mildew. The laundry machines worked. Doors no longer creaked or jammed. There were rumors in the building. Whispers of a new owner, someone silent but generous. Some speculated it was a corporation, others a philanthropic trust. No one suspected it could be the woman who once stood on the curb with tears in her eyes, her child pressed tightly to her chest. Maria watched it all from a distance. She never returned to the building, not openly. She drove by occasionally, windows tinted, observing from the curb. She didn't need recognition. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation, about dignity, about restoring what had once been taken. Meanwhile, Maria and Julian moved into a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood just 15 minutes from the building. The new house was modest but beautiful. White picket fence, a small garden out front, and a sunlit kitchen where Julian often played with his toy trains while she made breakfast. She enrolled him in a private preschool known for its nurturing approach. On his first day, he wore a small blue backpack and clutched her hand tightly. "Do we get to come back to this house?" he asked as she kissed his forehead. "Yes, baby," she whispered. "This is our forever home." Peace slowly returned. The anxiety in her shoulders softened. The sleepless nights faded. Her laughter, once hidden beneath sorrow, became natural again, especially when Julian told his silly stories or proudly showed her drawings taped to the refrigerator. Yet, for all her progress, Maria never truly forgot the weight of those months, the nights in the shelter, the humiliation, the fear of uncertainty. That pain shaped her, sharpened her sense of purpose. It's what pushed her to offer more than just shelter to the tenants now, living under her quiet generosity. She gave them dignity, safety, and comfort. And still, her identity remained a mystery to everyone inside. Until one afternoon, the building's newly polished gate buzzed. A security guard stepped out to speak to a man standing just outside. His clothes were rumpled, his hair messy, and his eyes sunken with exhaustion. He held a small duffel bag in one hand, the other shielding his face from the sun. Back at her home, Maria sat in the garden reading, unaware that the past had just returned to the very doorstep she now quietly owned. Mr. Grayson looked nothing like the man who once barked orders through apartment hallways, his voice thick with arrogance and entitlement. His coat was threadbare, stained at the sleeves. His shoes, scuffed and splitting at the soles, shuffled as he stood awkwardly outside the newly renovated gate of the apartment complex he once owned. A small duffel bag, worn at the seams, was slung over his shoulder, the sum of what remained of his life. He hadn't meant to end up here. After selling the building, he thought he'd finally get to live the life he always believed he deserved. Fast cars, poetic, liquor that burned clean and sharp. The casinos had welcomed him at first, flashing lights, VIP rooms, free drinks poured with flattery. And then, they'd taken everything. By the time he realized what he'd done, the money was gone. The condo he'd bought was foreclosed. His friends stopped answering his calls. He slept in a shelter for 3 nights, but his pride couldn't stomach it any longer. He needed something familiar, something that felt stable. That's when he remembered the old apartment building. It had been sold, yes, but maybe, just maybe, the new owner would let him work. Sweep the floors, keep the lights on, even sleep in the old storage room, just for a while. So he stood there now, at the gate of what was once his domain, staring up at the freshly painted walls and polished windows. The place looked nothing like he remembered. Cleaner, brighter, lived in. A security guard approached. "Can I help you, sir?" Grayson cleared his throat. "I used to own this place. I was wondering if I could speak to the new landlord. I'm looking for work. Maintenance, cleaning, anything really." The guard looked at him, eyes softening slightly, and nodded. "Come with me." They walked in silence through the courtyard Grayson once ignored, now blooming with flowers and well-trimmed grass. The benches were occupied with tenants chatting and children playing, their faces relaxed, happy. Inside the main office, the property manager sat at her desk, reviewing maintenance schedules. She looked up as the guard motioned toward the former landlord. "This is Mr. Grayson," the guard said quietly. "He's looking for work. Said he's willing to take anything." The manager's brows lifted, surprised, but before she could respond, the door behind her creaked open. A soft breeze followed, and in stepped Maria, dressed in a simple ivory blouse and dark slacks. She carried an air of quiet strength. Her eyes, clear and unreadable, met Grayson's the moment she entered. He froze. His mouth parted slightly. The color drained from his face. It was her, the woman he'd thrown out with cold words and an iron heart. The woman whose child cried beside her as she packed her things in the hallway while he turned his back. She didn't say a word at first. She simply looked at him, letting the weight of recognition settle. Grayson swallowed hard, eyes darting to the floor. "Maria," he murmured, as if the name might soften her glare. "I didn't know. I didn't realize." She stepped forward slowly, arms crossed loosely in front of her. "You didn't realize the woman you humiliated might one day stand where you once did?" He tried to explain, voice cracking. "I lost everything. I made mistakes. I was wrong. I'm not here to beg. I need a job, somewhere to sleep. I don't expect anything more." Maria looked at the duffel bag, slouched against the chair, the lines etched into his face. He wasn't the same man. Arrogance had been replaced by desperation. His fall had broken him. She looked at the property manager and nodded once. "Give us some space," she said softly. "I'll speak with him alone." The room fell quiet as the property manager stepped out, closing the door softly behind her. The silence between Maria and Mr. Grayson hung thick, like the very air had been forced to hold its breath. He stood awkwardly in the center of the office, clutching the strap of his duffel bag, his eyes darting from the floor to the walls, anywhere but her face. Maria remained standing, arms folded, her expression unreadable. Her gaze was steady, not angry, but resolute. She had nothing to prove, and yet everything about her presence proved more than words ever could. I didn't know, he stammered at last, his voice rough. I had no idea it was you who bought the place. Maria didn't respond. Her silence was a mirror, reflecting back every memory he wanted to forget. I was wrong, he continued, words tumbling out like they'd been waiting to escape for months. Back then, I was bitter, selfish. I thought owning property gave me power. And when you fell behind on rent, I treated you like nothing, like you didn't matter. He paused to swallow hard, shame trembling in his throat. But you did. You had a child, you were grieving, and I acted like your pain inconvenienced me. Maria's gaze didn't waver. She remembered every word he'd said the day he kicked her out, the cruelty, the humiliation. And yet, standing here now, seeing him like this, she didn't feel satisfaction. No vengeance, only clarity. I didn't ask you to pity me, she said softly. I asked you for time. I know, he said, voice low, and I didn't give it. I made you pack your life in bags and walk out like you were nothing more than a burden. I was wrong, Maria. He looked up now, his eyes red. I am sorry. Truly, I've lost everything, and I deserve that. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had nowhere else to go. He hesitated before the next words came. I'm not asking for charity. I need to work. I'll clean floors, fix pipes, shovel snow, anything. Just give me a corner of the building to sleep in. That's all I'm asking. Maria studied him. The man before her was not the one who had once stood at her door with eviction papers and a smirk. This man was crumpled by life, hollowed by regret. And most of all, he was honest. She slowly walked to the window and looked out over the courtyard, where tenants now gathered peacefully in the sun. Kids played near the benches she had paid to restore. A single mother across the lawn balanced groceries and a toddler, just as she once had. When she turned back, her voice was steady. You were cruel to me when I was at my lowest. You didn't just take a roof from me. You took dignity from someone who already had so little left. He nodded, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. But, she added, I won't carry your bitterness. His eyes lifted slowly. I forgive you, she said. A sob caught in his chest, but he held it in, lowering his head as tears slipped down his cheeks. Thank you, he whispered. Maria stepped closer. I'm offering you a job. Full-time caretaker. There's a small room in the back unit. It has a bed, running water, and a door you won't ever need to fear being locked out of again. He looked up, stunned. You do that for me? I'm doing it for me, she replied. Because hate doesn't build anything. But mercy does. He couldn't speak. He simply nodded, holding his bag, close like it was the last piece of him that hadn't collapsed. Maria walked past him and opened the door. Welcome home, Mr. Grayson, she said. And this time, he didn't take it for granted. The small room in the back of the building wasn't much, just enough space for a bed, a narrow dresser, and a modest kitchenette. But to Mr. Grayson, it felt like a palace. He cleaned it himself, repaired the cracked tiles in the bathroom, and even repainted the walls with leftover supplies from the building's last renovation. Each morning, he swept the hallways before sunrise. He mopped the floors, cleared the trash bins, tended to the courtyard flowers he once ignored. He never complained. His hands, calloused and sore, worked with quiet diligence. The man who once barked orders now moved with humility. Maria visited the building often, not to inspect, but to connect. She walked the halls with a gentle smile, greeted tenants by name, and listened. Her presence brought peace. Children waved to her from balconies, and elderly residents held her hand gratefully. They didn't know every detail of her past, but they knew she cared, and that was enough. The building had changed. Not just structurally, but spiritually. Where once there had been fear and neglect, now there was dignity and warmth. One afternoon, as Maria stepped out onto the courtyard walkway, she saw Mr. Grayson kneeling by the flower beds, planting fresh marigolds. She paused. "They're beautiful," she said softly. He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Try to make something grow in a place I once left dry." She smiled faintly and walked over. They stood side by side in silence for a moment, watching bees circle the blossoms. "It's strange," he said quietly, "the way life turns." Maria nodded. "Strange, yes. But sometimes it turns exactly the way it should." He looked at her, not with guilt anymore, but with deep, respectful understanding. "I never imagined this building would mean anything more than money to me. But now, every morning I walk these halls, I remember what I did. And I'm thankful I get to make it right, even in small ways." She met his gaze. "You are." No bitterness lingered between them, only growth, and the quiet, humbling recognition that time doesn't just pass, it teaches. Maria stepped back, tucking her hands in her coat pockets. "Keep up with the garden," she said. "Spring's coming." He nodded, smiling. "I will." As she walked away, the building behind her stood tall. The same walls that once closed in on her now opened wide to welcome others. It was no longer a place of endings. It was a home she'd rebuilt from the ground up, in strength, in grace, and in full circle. If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.